Are you ready to be unmessable with? Well, you are in the right place. Welcome to Be Unmessable With, the podcast where you get the inspiration, strategy, and coaching to be unmessable with, no matter what life throws at you. And now, your host, Josselyne Herman-Saccio.
Welcome to the Be Unmessable With podcast. I'm your host, Josselyne Herman-Saccio, and I am so happy today because we have one of my dearest friends as my guest. She started as a nurse, and then she went into the Air Force, okay? And she became a captain in the Air Force. When she finished the Air Force, she went to school for broadcasting and ended up in radio over 40 years ago. And quite honestly, the rest is history. She was inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame in 2017. She's been an author, a race car driver, a philanthropist. She has a huge passion for the stock market and is the person who turned me on to the stock market. So I have to say she's almost like my dealer when it comes to the stock market because I'm a bit addicted now. And we are actually stock trading partners. And while I say she's one of my dearest friends, the truth is she's really more like family to me. So I'm so thrilled that she is here today on the show. Let me introduce to you my friend, media icon, Robin Quivers. Welcome, Robin.
Wow. That was quite an introduction.
Maybe I don't know if edit it for you so that you can play it every morning.
Sounds like a big deal.
You can put that as your alarm clock, and when you wake up, it'll be like, and welcome, media icon to life.
I'll just step into that every morning.
Sounds good to me. So is there anything I missed? Anything you want people to know that I mean, obviously it's a huge career, so I'm sure I didn't hit everything, but.
Yeah. And I'm pretty old, so it would be hard to get everything in. But I think I'm good. All of that was actually true. So
good. No lies so far. So keep ourselves honest. One of the reasons, obviously, I wanted to invite you to my show is because it's my show and you're one of my best friends, but also because you are really one of the most unmessable with human beings I've ever interacted with, and we've known each other a long time, like almost 30 years, I think.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. It's kind of crazy. And I wanted to give you the chance to share with our listeners some times in your life that you can recall where you were dealing with such difficult circumstances that most people might not have risen above it, might have just gone down for the count in those circumstances, but you were able to transcend what you were dealing with and emerge what you and I call unmessable with. So whatever comes to mind.
Well, gee, it's really interesting when I think about, you introduced me to the term unmessable with, and I was like, well, what is that? And I always, it was almost like I stepped out of the womb unmessable with, because, I was born in some curious circumstances and, with a family that was not all, that together and didn't really know what they were doing and didn't know how to raise kids or be a family. And they also had a lot of preconceptions about, what a girl could do or what a Black girl could do. And I heard that like on a loop as I was growing up. And I always thought, who are they talking about? They couldn't be talking about me.
That's pretty funny, actually. Most people take things personally. You're like, what are they doing? Who are they talking about? That can't be me.
About. So, you don't know anything about the world. You're 4, you're 5, And so it just didn't seem to me that there should be all these restrictions. And so I was just like, whatever. That's not going to be my life. And, so I just marched on. And when we moved to a new neighborhood, I became the only Black kid in my kindergarten class. And, I was being prepared for something terrible to happen. Okay, you're going to go there and people are going to probably do whatever. And
oh, I'm sure they were
yeah,
preparing. They were
yeah.
scared, I'm sure.
And they were frightened, right? And so I walked into the classroom and they gave me a seat. And, the class went on. And I was just thinking, well, maybe I'm not supposed to do this, and I saw the other kids sort of stepping up and doing things. And I was like, maybe I'm not supposed to like join in and do what they're doing, and stuff like that. So I just sort of sat and took it all in. And, this kid started talking to me in the class and she's like, oh, well, where do you live and where are you from? And, that kind of thing. And, she just kept talking. I kept answering and I found out about her. And, the next thing I know, I'm sitting in her little group at lunchtime and everybody's talking. And, sometimes some crazy things were said. It was like very hysterical to me because I remember, she was wondering, she didn't say anything. But she went home one day and she said to her mom, I have this new friend, her name is Robin, and her skin is brown. And she said, so why is her skin brown? And her mother said, oh, she's just like, when we leave cookies in the oven too long and they get a little dark. And she came into school the next day. She goes, I know why Robin is brown.
And I'm sure that was a revelation to you.
Yeah. And she tells this story. And I'm like, I know that's not true. But who cares? Okay, whatever floats your boat.
Exactly. That's the exact words I was going to use. I'm glad you said it.
It was pretty funny that I was like, boy, people say weird, I listen to weird stuff at home. And other people say weird stuff too. So I wasn't really going to be affected by all these strange things that were said or happened. And, sometimes I'd sneak into my brother's room and play with his toys. And then he'd come home and get upset because a girl had touched his toys. And I was like, that is just too bad,
I think that should be your slogan. That is just too bad. That should be the hats, the t-shirts. It's like, that is just too bad, my friends.
Because I was like, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. I'm stuck here in the house all day because he was 4 years older. So he's already in school and I'm still waiting to go to kindergarten, I guess, at some of these moments. So I would sometimes go, I don't like playing with dolls. I don't know why I only get dolls for Christmas. And, and so I'd go in his room and move his little toy soldiers around and he'd come home and blow up because I had touched his things, but I didn't care. So anyway, it was sort of like that. Like, yeah, the world acts very strangely and I can't be bothered with this kind of strangeness, so they would even say things like, when you grow up and get married and have children. I was like, why do I have to do that?
What are they talking about?
why do I have to do that? I've just not thought of that.
I love that. I love that. What I hear you saying, which is so, so demonstrative of being unmessable with, it's like, life is throwing you circumstances. You've got to deal with people doing whatever they do, saying whatever they say, circumstances being what they are. But that doesn't have to get on you. Like, you could actually create who you are, how you act, what you act on, versus being in this world of reaction to everybody and everything. And that's the essence of being unmessable with.
Yeah. And you don't even have to, just because people are saying things doesn't mean you have to believe it. That was the other thing, because, there were all these, you're going to grow up and get married and da, 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 and you'll be a housewife. And, there was a whole, and I was like, ugh, I don't know about all that. And so one day we're in school and we're playing this card game, and the card game is Old Maid. And so they're dealing out the cards, and I'm watching. I'd have never played this game before. I don't know anything about it. And nobody wants the old maid card. And I'm like, well, what is an old maid? And one of the kids says, oh, that's a woman who never gets married. I said, oh, that's what I want to be.
Very few people got to be what they wanted to be when they were little, and you ended up being able to fulfill your childhood dream, Miss Quivers.
Sounded really like a great thing to me.
That's hysterical.
You know, my parents didn't have a great marriage, and my mother had to listen to my dad, you know, and he might say, you know, some crazy thing, or, you know, it might cause trouble, but she still had to go along because he was the man of the family and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, I don't understand why we have to do it, even though you know it's not going to work out. And, you know, so even that was sort of going on for me. Like, why do I have to listen to this person who doesn't know what he's talking about?
Mm.
So yeah, it was just like that way all the time. And it even extended to outside of the house. I remember once, you know, we were having a little tea party in the backyard, and we had gathered up all our change, our spare change, so we could go to the corner store and get our, you know, tea party things. You know, we were going to get some soda and, you know, some cake and whatever we could find so we could have a tea party. And we gathered up all this money, and I gave it to one of the girls and sent her off to go get this stuff at the little corner store. And so she comes back crying. And I said, what happened? Where's our stuff? She said, the soda machine took all our money. And I said, did you ask, you know, the owner of the store?
Yeah.
About, you know, fixing that? And she said, he just threw me out. He just said, go away, go away, go away, because it was like lunchtime rush hour for him.
It's a rush hour at the corner store.
But there was this factory that was right across the street, and so all these guys would pour into his store to get their lunch. And so I was like, give me that, you know, whatever it was she had in her hand. And I marched around the corner to the store, and I was so little that he, you know, he had this very high counter, and he couldn't see me because I was right at the counter. And I started, you know, I only did what I saw my parents do when they were upset. I started cursing at him.
Oh my God.
These curse words being hurled at him, and he looks over the counter and he says, why are you speaking to me that way? And I said, because your soda machine took our money and you won't give it back. And so he was like, I got to get this kid out of the store.
Yeah, really. It's like, let's just shut her up at least, you know.
So he went to the soda machine, opened it, and saw the money was stuck there. And he says, what do you want? We picked out our sodas and whatever else we wanted. And I came home with all the stuff. And I was like, why can't everybody do that? Yeah. Why do I always have to be the one with the big mouth who goes and makes things right? And so I was just like, there must be something different about me, because I will never, ever just sit with something happen, you know, like, oh, I can't, you know, she came back with nothing. And I was like, oh, that would never happen to me. And so it's just been that way the whole time. And I've never, you know, I don't do these things unless somebody messes with me.
Right, right.
But, you know, I mean, like I said, my parents had this idea about, you know, and I didn't even understand this conversation at the time, but there were 2 kindergarten classes, and the one teacher and my teacher were standing there one day, and we had combined the classes for some activity or something. And one of the jobs was to hand out the milk and cookies or the napkins or whatever it was. And I got one of those jobs, and I'm doing my thing. And I hear the older teacher say to the younger teacher, well, she's pretty nice, isn't she? And the other teacher
Like,
says,
how shocking.
she says, she's an absolute joy. And I was like, oh, that's me.
Absolute joy. Another t-shirt.
And so, later I was like, oh, that, because she hadn't, there were no other Black kids for this teacher, I guess, to have become aware of. This was very early on in the changing of this neighborhood. And so she was, just like, wow, she seems pretty nice, huh? And, so I was like, whatever. And, being the only Black kid, the teacher learned my name first. So while she was still grappling with everybody else's name, I was Robin right away. And I was like, I like this. I like being special. I like standing out. And so it never occurred to me that, somebody knowing my name right away and not being a member of the crowd and all of that stuff always seemed like a good idea to me. And I was never much interested in peer pressure. Always had my own thoughts. An unexamined life is like a pretty sad life, because I always call it like, you have a blackboard. That's your life, and whatever you write on the blackboard will be your life. Don't let other people write on your blackboard.
I love it.
And so I used to be like, that's not going on my blackboard. I don't care what you say. I write on this blackboard, and I'm the only one who can write on this blackboard. And my opinion about something is more important than anyone else's. And so that was some of the stuff that I just took on as I was growing, that sort of defined not being messable with. Because I'll tell you, you really don't want to mess with me.
But that's now when you're like, don't mess with me, is a little bit more of a reaction, right? Now, I have seen you in so many circumstances not be in a reaction, don't mess with me because you'll get in trouble kind of thing, more like a creation of what you're creating, right? So you've dealt with circumstances that most people will never deal with, and that's not a person saying something to you, but actually like real life stuff coming at you, whether it's in your career or with your health or with your family. So talk to me about, or talk to us about any of those that, you've dealt with over the last however many decades that you were able to create a vision and fulfill on it. Not so much, you're not going to get to me, but more like, I'm creating this and that's how it's going because I said so.
Ah, well, that's, again, even that stuff with the old maid, it was like, oh, another opportunity, another choice. That wasn't necessarily one that was offered until I was playing this game. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And so, and then, growing up in this sort of changing neighborhood and everything, one of the things that we were supposed to be most afraid of was the Nword. Like you'd be prepared. One of these days,
somebody's going to say it.
Going to say that, and you're just going to be devastated. So I was like, oh, geez, that sounds weird. That I have to be devastated.
Devastated if somebody says something. Yeah.
Something. But okay, that's what's out there. And one day a group of us were walking home from school, and there was always this girl who was supposed to be walking with us, and she was always 2 blocks ahead. So we'd all start off together, but she walked really fast.
My son is a fast walker. Sage and I walk to the subway, and it's like, I'm like, all right, see ya.
So we're like, we're supposed to be all together, but she's always, all the way around the corner. We don't know where she is until we, get on that side and see her again. And one day we walked around that corner, and there she was. There was this little boy on the ground crying, and she was standing above him with her fist balled up. And we're like, what happened?
We missed a meeting here.
And she said, he called me a nigger. It was a little white boy. And I said, oh, a different response.
Add that to your repertoire.
She's not devastated.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I said, oh, there are other responses. There aren't just these one responses, like you hear from your family, if this happens, that's
yeah,
that kind of thing. And I said, oh, that's a different response than the one I was told about. And so I was like, oh, yeah, I should look for other. I said, I don't want to knock a little boy down.
It's a possible response, but if you could create anything, perhaps not that.
Right, but that didn't appeal to me. I didn't want, to see this little boy lying on the ground crying. And, so I was just out there in the world looking for, other things, right? Just like looking for what might happen to you. Every Halloween, our candy got stolen by these bigger boys in the neighborhood. We go and collect the candy, and then they'd chase us all and steal our candy. And so this one year, everybody always ran. And I said, I'm tired of running and still losing my candy.
Yeah, really, that sounds like a horrible horrible option.
Right.
At least if you're going to run, keep the candy. But
so they swarmed in, and I was like, no, you're not taking my candy. No. And this one kid ran up and he threw me across the hood of a car and was about to, and I was perfectly willing to take the punch.
Yeah.
And then one of his friends said, stop, she's a girl. And he was like, oh, and he let me down and let me walk away. And I thought, that's my fight.
Did you get to keep the candy, though?
I had kept my candy.
Come on.
But I was like, nobody's supposed to interfere. I need to take care of this. And so that was another thing. I don't want anybody fighting my battles for me, because where are you going to be?
Yeah, when you're in those moments.
You're not going to be there all the time. I have to learn how to handle things. And so even as I was growing up, I was like, you've got to know where your power is. And one of the things I find about women is somehow they don't really know when they're in authority. And I say that because here I am, a grown woman now, and I was working at NBC. And one day I walk into the newsroom. In the afternoon, the newsroom was all women. And we had a engineer station that was manned by one of the people in the engineering department. And this particular day, it was this guy, Ollie. Ollie was there to work for us. We tell Ollie what to do. We need tape pulled or, something recorded. He does that for us. And so I walk in, and all of the girls are standing over in a corner having a conversation. And I finally said, what's going on up there today? And I walked over, and they said, did you see what Ollie put at his workstation? And I said, no, go over there and look. I go over to Ollie's workstation, and he has a girly calendar. They were in bathing suits or something, but he had pinned to the bulletin board. And I said, is this what you're upset about? And they
really?
said, yes. And I took the push pin out, and I just tore it up and threw it in the garbage. I said, now you can go back to work. And they were just like, and the funniest thing, Ollie never mentioned that the calendar disappeared. He had forgotten it was there.
That's
so
too much.
Yeah, they were all carrying on about something he didn't even care about. Now, I've told other people this story, and some of them, mostly women, will say, oh, but you didn't talk to him? I said, why would I waste my time talking to him?
About what? About paper on his wall? I mean,
he has an office. This was not his office. If he wants to have a girly calendar, he can put it in his
office. Exactly.
And I was perfectly willing to have a conversation with him if he asked me about it. But it was our room. This was where we worked. He was there to assist us. So that's exactly how I looked at it.
Yeah.
And just took care of it because it was causing this commotion.
And what do you think it was that had them be frozen about it, not taking action, but allowed you to take action? Because that's the difference between being messable with and unmessable with. They're frozen in some sort of state of reaction.
Well, I think that a lot of times women aren't told that they can be proactive. You know, whenever they react, they're wrong. And if they're proactive, they're bitches. So a lot of women don't want to be called a bitch. They want everybody to like them. I've seen this syndrome. And I said, you know, authenticity is so much more likable. Because nobody ever disliked me while I was doing all of this stuff.
Well, it's funny because
still...
I was going to say, you know, my friend Charlene, who's now in her 80s, but I remember when she was 70, I said to her, give me some of your life lessons. Like, I don't want to have to spend this much time learning it. You tell me now, you've reached 70. She said, well, one, don't wear heels. I regret wearing heels. So I stopped wearing heels that day. And the second thing she said, which mirrors what you're saying, is, you know, I'm just not worried about whether people like me anymore.
Well, I was well liked and nobody ever stopped talking to me. They got a big kick out of me, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, what's Robin gonna do now?
That's right.
Because
better to be respected.
The usual thing, you know? It was like, oh, something's going to happen because, you know, Robin's coming. And yeah, you know, so that kind of thing was going on all the time. And another thing that I discovered was don't automatically assume what the reaction will be. So Bill Maher, the guy who does Politically Incorrect or whatever that he's calling it now on HBO, his father was our editor. So I've known Bill since he started doing stand-up comedy because we used to watch him with his dad. And, you know, and Bill was Bill Sr. was a great guy. And so one day I handed in, he would go over our copy to make sure we were, you know, copacetic and everything we were going to put on the air. And so one day I, you know, collected the stories I wanted and I wrote the copy, and then I handed him the tapes I was going to play of reporters reporting on these stories. And he said, oh, you've used all female reporters. And you can't do that. You're a female, and then all of the reporters you're going to use are female in these stories. And, you know, instead of just going along with that, I just said, Bill, would you say that to me if I was a guy and these were all men? And he stopped and he thought, and he said, forget everything I just said. Do it your way.
Good for him.
Yeah. So don't assume that you're going to have a problem or this is, you know, an issue that needs to go to the board or whoever it is you talk to. A lot of times I just handle things with the person I'm dealing with. There was a time I was cutting some tape with an engineer I didn't know. And it was videotape, and these women were in the video, and he makes this weird sexist comment about one of the women he's looking at in the video. And I just said, do you know me? And he said, no. I said, then how do you know that's an appropriate statement to make around me? Oh, I'm so, I didn't mean, I said, don't assume anything. I'm here to cut tape. Why don't we do that? And that was that.
Yeah.
You know, it was just like, why should I have to go to a boss or some HR department to have this little, hey, you're not thinking while you're working. You don't just say anything, yeah, especially if you don't know somebody. How do you know what I'll do?
You don't. And you get things done so much more quickly if you handle them as they're happening versus having to turn them into a whole thing.
It would have been days of carrying on if now a report has to be sent to HR and then HR has to review it and then there's got to be a meeting and a this and a that. I'm like, this is stuff that doesn't even need to be taking up people's time a lot of the time.
Well, that would be a useful place for a lot of people to be thinking from. Our culture has become so report that, notify them this, sue them on that, da da da. I mean, it's just become so litigious.
Who do I talk to about that? Not the person that did.
Exactly. It's like anybody but that person, where I could actually get it complete and move on and not have this taking up space in my heart and my life.
Right.
It's a different
and you
place
also have to understand that not everybody sees it from your point of view. To automatically assume that guy knew what he was doing and just decided to say that. Don't assume he knows that's inappropriate or he wouldn't have said it.
Most likely, yeah. It's people are thoughtless. They're on automatic. They just do stuff. It's very rarely personal, and sometimes maybe there's ill intent, but it's more likely than not.
Right. I mean, to assume that all statements are for ill intent is to be wrong a lot of the time.
Yes.
And to have somebody now being, hauled into an office and, it just creates friction between all of these people working together. And now, she told on me, and he's telling everybody, don't mess with her. She's a troublemaker, or, whatever. It just gets worse. It doesn't make anything better.
Yeah, that adds mass to the thing. That's how I would call it. And, given you've been now over 40 years doing what you're doing, that speaks volumes to how you retain a career and build a career and keep a family of people that are working together is to deal in that way, because the other way people go from job to job to job, because once they have reported to all the levels and they haven't gotten what they wanted, the only recourse they have is to leave.
Yeah, but I also feel powerful. I never feel like I don't have any power. And so that's another thing. I don't know where this idea that you don't have any power comes from. And so when I it didn't occur to me that I shouldn't say something to this guy because I don't have any power.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And even when you were little, you could hear that with the soda machine. It's like, well, let's do something about it. I can do something. I have power. I have agency. So when you have power, you don't need force and you don't need all that stuff, because you have an access to impacting things.
I even noticed in the Air Force, when I was in the Air Force, that was a real big mistake.
I thought you were going to say that was a real big adventure.
Well, everybody knew but me that I don't like authority. So when my friends heard that I was going into the Air Force, they were like, "Are you crazy?"
All right, for those of you listening, I can't imagine, I'm probably going to have to make this 2 or 3 episodes, because we had such a great conversation through so many chapters of your life. But if you heard something that resonated with you, if you learned something, if you got inspired by something, please rate and review the episode and share it with people in your life that you think it would make a positive difference with, because that's what this is about. This show is about being unmessable with wherever you're not, and fulfilling your dreams now, not someday. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of Be Unmessable With. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Be Unmessable With, the podcast. I always love that you spend a little time with us listening or watching this podcast. And I want to make sure that you get value every time you do. So I want to offer you a free 1 hour workshop on money. Does money mess with you? If you're a human being, then it likely does. At least every human being I've ever met, it messes with them to some degree. So it's not so much how much money you have, but your relationship to money. And we have a free 1 hour workshop that was co-led by myself, my good friend, media icon, Robin Quivers, and our wealth coach, Tyrone Jackson. So click below and you can have instant access to Unmessable with Money. Unleash your inner millionaire.